Okay. All right, so it is recording right now, which is brilliant. So the second housekeeping session it is that following different questions I have from people, all sessions are absolutely free and open to really everyone. This is really a passion of mine to just run this kind of discussion. So the more people we have, the better. So if you know anyone who might be interested, absolutely spread the news, and I'll be adding everyone to Teams, and I'll discuss in a second how this session will be running. But yes, absolutely anyone can join. You don't need to necessarily be a practice-based researcher. Maybe you just want to listen about what is that we're doing. So it's absolutely free for everyone. Now, the next point is really important. This is a seminar. This is not a conference. So all the informal discussions are very, very welcome. And we're going to have a lot of time as the session progresses to discuss the things, because I think this is the whole idea. And as you can see, what I'm trying to say here is I really want to build a community and a network, because I certainly don't have all the answers for all the questions in relation to all the things we're going to be discussing here. So if you're here thinking that that's what it is, it's not. I do have some answers and I do have some ideas, but definitely what it is the idea of bringing people together and just really exploring different elements, different areas of all the trajectory of what practice-based research is. And I'll talk about it in a bit more details later on. But what I'm hoping to do is that together we can make some sense of what practice-based research is, how to approach it, and there will be more aims I have, which I'll introduce in a second. So the next thing is the Microsoft Teams, and I think another, what I realized, I didn't expect so many people to sign up. What I did initially, I've added the first people who got in touch with me to the actual events, today's session. But the problem with this was every time a new person wanted to be added, I needed to effectively resend the invitation. And that means the first person who was added would be receiving the same invitation over and over again, which is not what I want to do. It's far from ideal. So what I'm going to be doing from now onwards, if a new person wants to join our community, I'm just going to be adding you to Teams. And again, for those of you who have any problems with this, get in touch with me. I will make sure I'll fix it. All the information, co-reading and networking will take place over there. And then in terms of the session, just join directly from the link. So I'll show in a second where the links can be found, but I think this is the most efficient way for us doing this, because I don't have to add 70 plus people to each event, and you are free to join whatever you want. The links should all work. I double checked it. I will triple check it just to make sure there's no surprises over there. But I think this is the best way of doing this. So what that means that if you want to join one of the particular sessions in the future, you will need to put it in your calendar, because it won't appear automatically. But I'm sure you can all do this. Now, I'll introduce the series in a second, but in essence, each session has a proposed co-reading and case studies, and the idea is that it is to be looked at prior to the session. Now, in some cases, like with the session which is happening after this one, some of the readings we'll be looking at are not published yet, so we're really privileged to be looking at things which are very fresh. In that case, what I will ask everyone to do is obviously do not share it beyond this group of people, because it's obviously going to be infringing the copyrights. But I think it's going to be really nice to look at things which are very fresh, and hopefully it will really make this conversation much more engaged, because I really believe that what we need to do is, I think this is really one of the reasons why I wanted to run the sessions, because very often when we think about practice-based research, we just look at many case studies. And the case studies are amazing. They're really fascinating. But what I'm missing personally sometimes is the answer to this question, and so what? So we have this great case study, and what happens after this? And that's why the way I designed this seminar. It has a very, very clear structure. So there are very specific topics I want to address. And hopefully each co-reading and case study will be looking at this idea. So what I'm planning to do, because obviously the co-readings in many cases will be provided by guest speakers. So I'm planning to upload all the things to Teams about a week before, so it gives us time to read it. Most of the times they're just articles and they're not very lengthy or online resources, so hopefully it will all be fine. Now, Francisco, I'm going to nominate you to be my assistant if you don't mind, because I don't see the chat. I don't see if anyone has a hand up because I my PowerPoint. So if there is something like this, would you mind letting me know?
I'll let you know. Yes, definitely. I'm just experiencing some bad connection. Not sure if it's my connection or the whole Teams, but just to let you know. Hope that'll be fine. It's freezing sometime. Okay, but
let's hope it's fine. If it's not working, please scream and shout, and I'll just see what I can do about it. But for now, I'm just gonna continue. Speaking of which, there's some acknowledgements and thanks I wanted to give. So first of all, I wanted to say thank you to all our internal and external guest speakers. So I'm gonna be doing the first session, which is the one today, and the last one, which I'll explain in a second. But in between, we have really, really fantastic range of people from within Staffordshire University and beyond who agreed to be on board and talk about their experience and expertise. So I'm extremely grateful to all of them. Francisco, you already met him. So he was mildly coerced into this collaboration. He's my tireless PhD student, very talented researcher who will be presenting our co-reading today. And he was just tasked with additional things, as you can see. So thank you so much, Francisco. That's really kind of you to find time for this in between your early stage reviews and other things you're doing at the moment.
It's a pleasure.
Definitely participants. So I just really wanted to say thank you to all of you. It wouldn't make any sense for me to run a seminar if it wasn't for you, because otherwise I would be talking to myself or to poor Francisco. So thank you so much for signing up. Thank you so much for being here. It makes me feel very good, especially about the number. I wasn't, as I said, expecting so many people, but it makes me think that there's obviously a need for us to talk about practice-based research, because otherwise there wouldn't be so many of us. And finally, I wanted to say thank you to Staffordshire University for allowing me to engage in this wild activity. So thank you. Now, if you've received my email, which I hope you have, you would have seen this before. I also uploaded this on Teams. So in essence, this is the plan for today. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to introduce the idea of seminars and how the structure works and who the guest speakers are, the idea behind it, which I kind of already started doing, and my aims and objectives. What is that I really want to achieve with this seminar series? The second thing, or the next thing I'll talk about is other ways you can get in which you can get involved. So as I said, my aim is not just to talk and do some presentations, but to really create a community and together find a way to bring more understanding. And there's more to that. I just want to find a way how we can support each other and how we can train future practice-based researchers. But other ways you can all get involved is there's going to be publication, conference, festivals, and this seminar. So I'll talk about the details in relation to that, how you can get involved beyond just being a participant to this seminar. Then inevitably, I'm going to bore you a little bit with my story. So I think I owe you some explanation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how I arrived at the crossroads between arts and research, and what kind of challenges it took to navigate it. And then we're going to hopefully arrive at the question of what is practice-based research. Now, if we really wanted to explore all the things written and discussed about it, we will be here probably until next year. So we will have to, the way I structured it, I'm just going to look at what I think are four main components or four main ways to answer this question. And hopefully it will make some sense and it will bring us some kind of idea to this discussion. And then, if needed, we'll take a short coffee break, but not very long because we only have an hour and a half for this seminar. We'll see how it goes. And then Francisco will introduce our core reading. I'm still hoping that we'll have time to look at the case study, which I think is really interesting. And hopefully we'll have some time for discussion and questions and answers. And I really would like to have about 30 minutes for that. But as I practiced my presentation yesterday, I realized I talk quite a lot. So I'll try to be brief with my part here, so we have more time for co-reading, case study, and the discussion. So this is pretty much what we're trying to achieve today. If there's no questions or comments at the moment, which I think we don't have because Francisco is sitting quietly there, I'm just gonna dive in and introduce the series. So I believe that because you're here, you would have all seen the poster we've created for this seminar. So as I said, there is a method to this madness. So the way I try to run the seminar is just to really identify the elements of practice-based research, which I think we need to explore, and just go back to these basic questions and try to see how we can approach, as I said, different elements of it. Now, I'll talk about it in a second, but this first round, there will be a second one and maybe the third one, is not discipline specific. So no matter if you're working with film, photography, fine arts, dance, performance, or poetry, or anything else, hopefully it will apply to you. So yes, in some cases, the examples or case studies will be looking more or less at obviously specific examples. But what I'm trying to do is to keep it rather generic, and it will obviously relate to creative arts and somehow a little bit social sciences, but it's not going to be a focus on just film only, for example, or any other thing. So today, as you already know, we'll try to answer this question: what is practice-based research, and what really defines it, and what kind of things we need to take into consideration when thinking about this definition. Now, next month, and I think this is a good moment to say that the way I design it, the sessions will be running over the whole academic year. About last Wednesday of the month, around the same time, so 3:30 to 5. And obviously December is going to look slightly different because we won't keep it until the very last Wednesday of the month. And what we have next week, we're going to look at a topic which is very close to my heart, which is this idea of, well, where does the artistic creative work ends and research starts? So what is this dynamic? What is this balance between creative process and academic research rigor? And for that, we have our very own amazing associate professor, Michael Brandway, who will be talking about his really, really inspiring experiences. I really look forward to this session and all of the ones which will follow. Now, in December, we are very lucky to have Associate Professor Nicole Brown from UCL, and she's going to be talking about creative methods. She's got incredible experience working with different elements of this, and we already have co-readings from her, which are really fascinating. So, really interesting session. Then, following that, in January, we have Professor Carola Baum, who will also be looking at methodologies, but in the context of post-disciplinary and transdisciplinary background, because I think we'll all agree in many, many cases when we think about practice-based research, it's very difficult sometimes to kind of label it within one discipline. At least this is my experience. It will be interesting to hear from other people what they think about it. The next session, which is going to happen in February, is to do with dissemination. So how do you share? How do you disseminate? What do you do with your practice-based research? And for some of us, it's easier. For film photography, well, I guess you can send it to film festivals, although I do have some anecdotes about it. But what if you do performance? What if you do improvised music? It's not always that easy. So I'm particularly interested in the ways practice-based research is disseminated, and I myself done a lot of research in trying to understand it. So we're gonna have Dr. Charlie Tweed from Spa University talking about it, and he will be talking about one specific journal which is dedicated to practice-based research. So the title of the session is "Who is it for and how we can communicate it?" Because I do think when we work with practice-based research, we're obviously not doing this for ourselves only, and hopefully for those of you who are working on your PhDs, it's not just for you to have a title, hopefully you want to achieve something more with your work. But the question is, how can you communicate it? Do you go through artistic and creative venues? Do you go through research venues? And as I said, this is something I'm really, really passionate about, and I actually do a couple of other things to bridge this gap between academia and creative world. Then in March, I'm really lucky to convince Professor Jana Callahan from Brighton University, and I'm gonna have Jana hopefully in the second round as well, talking about her incredible research in film. But in the first round, she's going to be talking about research assessment and impact. So really, really interesting things. So she was responsible for ref, for films and other things. So it will be really, really insightful to see her view on that. Then session number 7, which is going to happen in April. Again, our very own Professor Fiona Graham and Paul Ottey, who will be talking about moving image as research practice. And again, the depth and incredible variety of things these two people do is just really, truly amazing. And you will see how many incredible things you can achieve, which are not really just film. This is just so much more, and the topics and the variety of things they do is just really, really impressive. Now, I have a bit of a problem with session 8 because I actually have 2 things I would like to do for this. So initially it was designed to be focused on reflexive practice, which is very important for your journey as a practice-based researcher, and we'll mention that a little bit today. And for that, I was really privileged to speak to Linda Candy, the same Linda Candy whose core reading you hopefully read before today's session, and she might agree to run this session. But at the same time, I have an amazing Professor Ian Brown from, again, Staffordshire University, who agreed to talk about reflexivity, but also creative inquiry, so practice-based actual creative inquiry. So I might have to split this session into, depending on what's going to happen. So that's yet to be confirmed, but definitely really important session, which again, for those of you who are still working on your PhDs, it is going to be very important for you to identify the role of your reflexive practice within your practice-based research. And what I'm hoping to do before we all take a summer break is to almost summarize all the discussions and all these amazing sessions and just really ask myself the question, how do you prepare future practice-based researchers? And again, you will understand more why I'm asking this question when I introduce you to my journey. But I think it's really, really important for us to ask yourself a question. So what is the training we all need to do? Because as I said before, from my experience, very often when you go to different seminars and different sessions, and there's lots of amazing stuff being done in practice-based research, and we look at this case study, but what I'm personally missing is this kind of discussion where you bring it back to basics. So hopefully will be one tiny step closer to answering this question in session 9. Now, the leaflet, one thing, again, in terms of finding the information about the session, so the website is a second place where you can find it. So at the moment, what I'm trying to do is booking your place is just basically, that means adding you to Teams. So on the website and on the leaflet, which you can download from the website as well, you have clickable links to each session, and you can just join directly from there. So I think this is the way we're gonna do it. And as I said, I'm gonna triple check that all the links lead you to the right session, that they don't lead you to one of my teaching sessions, because that wouldn't be very helpful. But I think this is the most practical way to do this going forward. But again, if people have any comments or other ideas, just by all means get in touch with me. And again, another place you can find information is on our Staffordshire University events website. So there are all the links over there. And I'm trying to share the things through Twitter, LinkedIn, and also Facebook. So again, if you are connected with me, you will find all the information there. I'm trying to send all the reminders. So I'm just trying, and also it's being shared with different mailing lists, so Mexa and other places. Now, excuse me. I have my tea here, which is very good. So this is a screenshot from our Teams, so hopefully most of you, if not all of you, had a chance to at least check it. So there are just really two main things I want people to be aware of in there. So once you have access to this, which you will if I've added you, it doesn't have any password. It's just like whoever was invited there. This is, as I said, there's only one thing I need to do. Then under files, you will have a folder for each session. So for this week's session, what is practice-based research? These are the things I've included. I actually added another article yesterday, which you didn't have to check. I mean, you don't have to do anything. It's obviously just for you to read on voluntary basis. But it wasn't part of today's session. I just thought it was really, really interesting to add it on so you can read it in your free time. And I'm pretty sure that if you are working with practice-based research, you've already seen these specific texts because they're really fundamental. And the second thing I really want people to use is the posts section. So this is where I hope people will just be able to network. And if there's any announcement, if you're already on Teams, I think that might be the easiest way for me to add some kind of news and announcements rather than sending emails. Because as I said, the numbers of people interested in the session or in a series is growing. And I think it's much easier for us just to keep it all in one place, because emails just get very quickly buried with, at least in my case, I'm sure it's the same for you. So I think this is going to be the most efficient way for people to get involved and have access to everything. Now, if for whatever reason you want to be removed from Teams, of course, let me know. I think you can remove yourself as well, but if you want me to remove you, just let me know, and of course I will. But if you want to be here, just make the most of it. So I'll be adding. I think it's also a good place in terms of resources for myself, because I think I'm just going to accumulate everything I have scattered around in this one place as we go along. Francisco, are there any questions from people? Is everything going okay? It is.
Agata, yeah, no questions. I think some people had problems to access the Teams. I'm not sure if the guests outside the Stanford University.
Yeah. So for that, if you do have problems accessing Teams, I know that some people had problems with their emails. Just get in touch with me, and I will fix it outside of this session. But yeah, just get in touch with me, and I'll make sure it works. We test it, and we'll make sure that everyone is in. So just get in touch, and I'll make sure that following this session, it's there. Lovely. Are we ready to proceed? I hope so.
Yes, let's go.
Okay.
Ready.
So without repeating what I've already said, because as you can see, I'm really clearly very excited about this whole seminar and the group of people being able to discuss it, I'm just going to address the points which I haven't talked about, because I think it's very clear that I want to establish a hub and community. So I said that already. Now, there are three main reasons why I think it's important. Well, number one, it is, as we'll see, so I have a slide about it, and Francisco will be talking about it a little bit as he introduces the core reading. Practice-based research is still a relatively new phenomenon. So we're talking about 2, 3, 3.5 maximum decades, which is not really that much. And I think there's still a lot of confusion and disagreements about it. There's still people who have very different opinions and sometimes misunderstandings about practice-based research. And that's a very good reason why we should be talking about. The next reason is I think it's a very dynamic and rapidly changing environment. So, for example, for me, as someone working with film and photography and potentially sometimes installations, which I might talk about, the way we make films is changing so rapidly. It's just not the same when compared with the time when I studied. So when I studied film direction, I was actually editing the actual negative with scissors and tape. You would probably laugh about it right now, and I think my students will really look at me in a very confused way if I was to talk to them about that these days. And I'm not that old, so it really changes very, very rapidly. And as I said, I think also the very reason that there's so many people wanting to talk about it, that means that there's still so many questions and the ways to approach what we're doing, which remain unanswered. So I think even these 4 things are very, very good reasons why we should be doing what we're doing here. And as I said, I mentioned that already. As I said, I'm very excited about it, so I'm jumping ahead very often. But the ultimate goal, and I don't know how soon we'll be able to achieve it, is to create some kind of toolkit, which is maybe a very simplified way of saying that, but the way or strategy to train and support current and future practice-based researchers, no matter where they're coming from, what discipline, at what stage of their career they are, and no matter what they want to achieve, but just really have some kind of common understanding of what is the best way, how can we approach it as a community together. And I kind of mentioned already that there are going to be 2 rounds, maybe there will be more, I don't know. But the second round, as I said already, we'll be looking at very similar questions. So we'll be looking at this trajectory of what practice-based research is and methodologies and outputs and so on and so forth. But I want to do this more discipline specific. So I will be identifying people who can talk about very, very different things. There's definitely going to be things to do with film and photography because that's where my heart sits. But my background is much wider than that. And I really am very, very much interested in things to do with theater, dance, fine art, and all the things, because I did do a little bit of all of that in the past. But again, the main disciplines obviously will be arts and humanities, and to some degree, social sciences. So this is what I'm trying to achieve. Let's see how it goes. So this is the section when I'm explaining everyone how we can get involved. So I've mentioned publications. So the immediate publication which will follow this seminar is a special issue I'm curating for the International Journal of Creative Media Research, where I'm currently appointed as a managing director. And what I'm doing, I want to almost translate what we're doing here into a special issue. Now, very, very shortly, I just need some day off to publish this. I will be creating an open call for submissions. So I'm hoping that some of the guest speakers we will have in this series will write for the special issue, but I want to open it for more people. So this is an open invitation for anyone in this call and beyond, even if you watch it as a pre-recorded video post this actual event, you're very welcome to consider that. So as I said, I'm hoping to publish this within next week or 2, as soon as I find some time to do this. And even if it's not for the special issue, I'm still the managing editor for the journal. So if you do have something interesting, check the website of the journal or get in touch with me if you want to. And I'm very happy to discuss your submission. That's something which, as I mentioned before, is really interesting for me to see how we can disseminate and publish practice-based research. And this is one of the venues, one of the many, I think. In relation to that as well, in relation to disseminating your work, another thing I did, which again, I invite everyone to get involved in one way or another. So I had this idea at the beginning of the pandemic. I really want to disseminate what we do in practice-based research. So with 2 colleagues of mine, we conceived this event, which originally was just conference and film festival, and we called it Communities and Communication. That links back to my background and to the idea of communicating research and art across different communities. Again, communities understood in many, many different ways. Now, it was really successful because with the first edition, an unknown event, no one ever heard about it. We just invented it. We have nearly 2,500 submissions from 105 countries. So again, it was really, really successful. Clearly, again, giving me the idea that there is a need to create something like this, because it's not necessarily an academic event. It's not necessarily an artistic event. It kind of sits in between these two. And I think this is what I'm personally really passionate about. I just want to create this bridge between the two. So in relation to that, the second edition, which is going to happen in May next year, is now open to any non-conventional submissions. So there's going to be also this art section to the festival, which means that we also accept fine art, performance, poetry, you name it, but it does need to have this relation to the festival principles. And the theme for this year is diverse voices. Again, diverse voices understood in a very, very wide way. So at the moment, the call for papers and submissions is open. I also recently opened a call for panels. So if you'd like to run your own panel, let's say you work with performance or you work with some other form of practice-based research, and you know enough people, you can approach and invite and run the panel. Again, get in touch or check the website for the festival, and I'll be very happy to hear from you. And I think I have a slide towards the end about it, but I can say it again because I love jumping ahead of myself. Another way you can get involved is participating in this seminar, doing Francisco's job. So just volunteering to introduce core reading, because I think it's a good idea to have a guest speaker and someone else who just basically introduces the core reading and perhaps identifies the questions based on it. And this way we have more people involved. So if you are interested in doing something like that, again, get in touch and I'll be really delighted for you to get involved. All right. So that's all with the boring stuff. I obviously talked for half an hour already, and I haven't even started addressing the question. So I'm just going to crack on with this. So the origins of the seminar. So as you can see, probably with all the slides I included some photographs, which are documentation of some of the things I've been doing. So perhaps I should introduce myself a little bit and just tell you who I am and what I do. So my background in essence is in film photography and installations, but I did a lot of things. I also studied a bit of acting. I did study a bit of drawing, paintings, and fine arts. I thought I was going to be a theater director. I also did a lot of creative writing. And actually, when I was a teenager, I wanted to sing in a band. So I did it all. I played guitar. But really, my background is in film photography and installation. So what I studied is film direction and digital media arts first. So these two things are very, very, very practice-based, hands-on. There's not much theory over there. And it really prepared me very well in terms of understanding my practice, in terms of understanding what is that I'm doing. Now, the third thing I studied was film and media studies, which was pure theory. And then my PhD, funny enough, was in Iberian and Latin American studies, even though it was a practice-based research. So I made a film with indigenous community in Colombia, and I could talk about this film for next 2 hours. So I'm just gonna control myself and just go to the next point in my slide here. In essence, what you need to know to understand where I'm coming from here is it took me about 8 years to finish this project for many different reasons. And it is the project which defined me as a practice-based researcher. And there's lots of reasons for that. One of them is that I have to apply all this creative needs, the creative work I was doing before into research. And I had to really rethink who I am and how I apply things and how I apply my creativity and skills as an artist into something which serves a completely different purpose. And I think it was really, really revealing. Now, a funny anecdote just to make you laugh a little bit. So the film, which took me a very long time to finish, I was effectively rejected from all the film festivals, apart from one which gave me some award for research. But at the same time, it was recently shortlisted for HRC Research in Film Awards, which is probably the most prestigious recognition for research film. And it made me really laugh because I thought it was obviously an awful film, but it's a good piece of research. It doesn't have to be this way. You can still make a good art and a good research, and I think this is where our case study comes today. But I think it's a very interesting question and a very interesting anecdote, because it seems like there's still this kind of division. So what part of this film is artistic or creative, and what part of this is research? I think it's really, really fascinating for me. Now, I think you can safely say that I'm properly obsessed with the idea of practice-based research at the moment. I'm just trying to focus my entire attention and time to different activities relating to that. So the editorial jobs I mentioned, there's other editorial jobs, research groups, currently developing MA in practice-based research, so a module for a new MA, which is focusing on this training for practice-based research. All my PhD supervisions are for practice-based, and that's what I'm trying to do at the moment, just trying to avoid traditional ones, just specialize in this. And there's some upcoming publications, so there's quite a lot of things I'm trying to do. And I already mentioned that in relation to dissemination, but I think it's really interesting for me to also understand what is the potential for dissemination of practice-based research. And I think the question I like to ask myself in relation to this is like, whose impact is this? When we talk about impact, and that's something I'm sure you will be having to talk about quite a lot in relation to your research. You have to prove this idea of impact, and there's lots of publications happening recently about impact for practice-based research, and it really is interesting how you define it. At the same time, I'm also very actively engaged in the idea of process, or the idea and process of decolonizing the curriculum in arts, and that kind of links back to the project I did and also my background. So you probably hear from my accent, I'm not necessarily, I wasn't born here. I was born in Poland, but I did live on 4 different continents, and I work in different environments. So in Asia, in South America, North America, and obviously in Europe. So it gave me a lot of different perspectives, and it really made me very, very passionate in relation to decolonizing things in relation to creative arts. And I think it's a very, very important discussion we should all engage in one way or another. And again, you would have guessed that already from what I said before, but my idea is to build this bridge between creative world and academia. And I think when we think about impact, which I just mentioned a moment ago, it is such an important thing for any researcher. I think there's no point of making any research if it's just aimed at academics themselves. It's absolutely pointless. We obviously have to have this impact. But I think for those of us working in creative media and practice-based research, I have a feeling it's somehow easier. The reason I find it easier because people who are not linked to academia, people go to galleries, people go to museums, people go to cinemas, people go to concert halls. So we have these tools for us to use for our research. So we can as well think how we can engage people, how we can get them interested, not only in your creative work, but also in more research-based questions, and sometimes very, very serious and important questions. And I think there's lots of things to discover, so we almost have it easier. And I think one last thing from my previous life before academia is I am a former artistic director for Discovering Latin America Film Festival in London, which sadly ceased to exist at the moment, but it is a kind of area I'm very, very much interested in. So again, I could talk about it for a very long time, but this is not the place. So without boring you too much with some examples of my work, I'm going to use just photography for this because I think it's easier. Sometimes I just put some of the photographs from my previous different kind of works together, and I look at them and I was wondering how many people would actually realize how many of these photographs were made for research and how many of them were made for purely artistic reasons. And I can guarantee you that it's not so straightforward. And I'm not going to be talking about all these projects because this session is not about me. It's about trying to answer specific questions. But what I'm trying to say that the answer is not very straightforward. It's very difficult to judge the things very easily because there's usually more to it. And I can tell you that in this example, I think some images might be very confusing. You might say, well, that's definitely for research and it's not, and that's definitely for creative reasons and it's not. But what is different, for example, is definitely my process and approach. So for what I called my artistic photography, which I did for over 20 years before I started considering this, well, maybe not before, but when I was continuing working with artistic photography, my process was very different. So first of all, it would be something I would today consider conceptual art. So I would sometimes come up with an idea and I would say, well, how can I explore it without necessarily knowing what the answer will be? So if you look at the photograph on top right corner, this one here, this was a very, very interesting project. It was an installation where I took close-up photographs of different elements of human body. This is an eyebrow. And what I realized, I was looking at, I was talking to my friends, and I was realizing that I don't really know how their eyebrows look like. And I was like, well, this is something I see every time I speak to them, but I don't really stare at their eyebrows. I don't really know how they look like. So what I realized that sometimes with things around us, and in a specific case with human body, with human face, you don't really know the details because you're so accustomed to just look at the face as a whole without really looking at the details. So what I did, I created these macro photographs of different elements of human body, so things like elbow, like an eyebrow, like fragment of foot or things like that. And I projected it on the wall in a gallery space. At the same time, I had my model closed in what was almost like a big box, but what you had is a lens I built at the end of the box. So all you could see is just a lens, and through the lens, you could see the same model live. So he would be showing his elbow, his eyebrow, his nose, his eye through the lens, and people were basically really astonished from what I was hearing to see how these big photographs, which were projected on the wall, look very abstract, and they were looking at the model through the lens, almost rediscovering human body. And we're not talking about any private parts over there, so things you would not normally see. We're just looking at the very, very basic elements of human face, or hands, or arms, or legs, which you would probably see quite often. And it was really revealing. Now, again, is it art or is it research? And I'm not trying to provoke this discussion about this in a specific case, but I think it's really interesting. Now, the reason I'm talking about it is because, for me, the way of working with this kind of projects was really, as I said, conceptual, and I had unlimited time and ways of exploring my topic before I arrived to the question. I didn't really know what I was getting from. So it was definitely for me an artistic project because I didn't really have any clear aims. I didn't really have any planning. There's lots of things, but you can argue, well, actually, you discovered some ways of looking at things in different ways. So we could have this conversation at some point, but I don't want to spend too much time on that at the moment. Now, when I started working with film and photography in Latin America, so I did some projects in Peru, I did some projects many projects in Colombia, some mini projects in Mexico. It was very interesting because I still wanted very much to take really beautiful photographs and videos with the things I was doing because, well, the place is beautiful. What's going on in front of my eyes is just amazing. So, of course, I just wanted to explore it. At the same time, the nature of my project was really very, very specific and very different. And I guess I had to rethink everything I was doing. So this specific community, the Arhuaco community, first of all, they live in a very, very isolated place in the middle of nowhere. And they are very, or at least they were at the time, very unwilling to collaborate with people from Europe or from global north or west, if you like, in relation to the filmmaking. It's because of a previous experience they have. They were very, they didn't trust people from the outside. And what happens is, like, when I came there, I had lots of preconceptions about what they were doing. And even though I kind of studied what they were doing before, it obviously is not the same until you get there and speak to them. And so I had this idea of the film I was going to make about their own filmmaking. But once I arrived there, I realized that actually they already made the film I wanted to make. So they already made the film about their own filmmaking. And I was like, oh, what am I going to do right now? And so what happened, I spent over 3 months with them. And at the time, they were in a process of making their own film. And they were traveling from one village to another, having really amazing meetings and discussing their positions as filmmakers and how they communicate the worries. And again, I could be here for hours talking to you about the project, but I'm just going to get to the point here. Is I could not, because initially I wanted to hire a local crew from film school who would help me make the film. But what I realized is that they don't want any film crew over there. They don't want anything like that. So effectively, I just joined them to all these meetings, and at some point, Amado, who is the gentleman here I'm pointing to my screen, realizing you don't see it. So the gentleman in the traditional clothing on bottom left corner photograph, he obviously knew about my intention, and at some point he asked me, why are you not filming your film? Why are you not starting making your film? So I did. So I took my camera and I started documenting what they were doing as I was helping them with their own filmmaking. Now, very often I have no idea what their plan was. So we will be in a village and they suddenly say, oh, actually, we're going to be filming something right now. And they're running down the hill to film one of the scenes for their film. I'm completely unprepared. I don't have any tripod. I don't have a microphone. So what I ended up getting is a film which is really technically flawed because, of course, I didn't have anyone helping with the sound. I didn't have anyone helping me with any cables. It was all a wild disaster. But it was, again, I argue research value of the film was just really incredible. And what I managed to record over there and the way I effectively made myself, the longer I think about it, the more I'm getting to the conclusion that what is the main subject of the film is myself as a researcher, really analyzing my position. So what on earth am I doing there, trying to make a film about them while they already not only made that film, but actually the whole filmmaking is about what I'm doing or other people like myself are doing. So it was really very, very auto-reflective at the moment. And I think that's one of the reasons why it took me such a long time to come to the final edit. And I think that's the reason why HRC recognized it, even though it's a horrible film. Very often you cannot hear things very well. The camera is shaky. It's all over the place. But it definitely is a practice-based research, because the way I write, and I'm kind of leading towards what we're going to be talking about in a second, asking the question about what practice-based research is. But effectively, the answer to my research question was achieved very much through my practice. So without me being there and doing what I was doing, I would have not get any response to my research question. I think this is the essence of what practice-based research is. So without going into too many details, because I know that this is in the core reading, I think it's just important to mention very briefly, again, this is from Candy, as I said, from our core reading. The practice-based research, as I mentioned, is a relatively new thing. So according to Candy, it started in Australia in 1984 with the doctorate in creative writing. And again, this is an interesting look here, because we start to look here at the idea of polytechnics. So the first one established in London in 1838, so very beginning of 19th century, which was the Royal Polytechnic Institution, which is now University of Westminster. And the idea of the polytechnics adding the service element to the mainstream higher education with emphasis in practice. And so with this kind of understanding, higher education is no longer just a center of new understanding, but a center of new ways of doing things and of knowledge that improved our ability to act in the world. And I really like this this description here, and it makes me feel very good about Staffordshire University, which was established as a polytechnic in 1914, and it got its official university rights as a university in 1992. So I think we are in a very good place here at Staffordshire University to talk about practice and, going forward, practice-based research. Now, again, this is one of the very, very, very many examples of how wild and unusual practice-based research can be. I have a friend who did his PhD at Birkbeck when I did mine, and he was working with performance, and effectively what he was doing, he was digging holes in public urban spaces. So a really unusual, fantastic thing focused on ecology of space, very, very unusual, very interesting. Another one which I actually wrote about a little bit in my PhD is Cecil Tolas, who is scientist. She's a chemist, but she's also an artist. And what she does, she works with smell. And there's this one exhibition she did, which is really incredible. It was a smell of fear. And what she did effectively, she extracted sweat of people, of men in distress situations, She distilled that, and then she used this massive white canvas in the gallery space and painted the white canvas with the smell, if you like, if the liquid which contained the smell, and the exhibition contained of you going to the gallery and smelling the fear. And it's just rather extraordinary. And I have 2 links over here. What I'll upload not only the recording but the PowerPoint itself, because there's a couple of links here. So you can check those 2 articles. I think they're quite interesting, because I'm aware how much time I'm taking with my talks. So I'll have to speed it up a little bit right now. Now, there's a couple of people I will be quoting today in the idea of practice-based research. One of them is Professor David Gauntlett, and he has a really interesting blog, which I highly recommend you to check. Again, the link is in the last slide. And in relation to exploring research questions through practice, which, as we establish, and I'll be repeating this throughout this presentation here, is the essence of practice-based research. So according to him, practice-based research is work where, in order to explore the research question, the researcher needs to make something as part of the process. And in that essence, the research is exploratory and it's embedded in creative practice. And it is really, really interesting. And I think if there's one definition which I agree with, and which for me is the essence of practice-based research, is exactly that, is your answers for your research are not illustrated in your practice, but they're coming from your practice. And I think this is the important element. Now, what is very important here is these 3 elements. So again, for those of you who are working on your PhDs, but I think it goes way beyond your PhD. It really applies to any practice-based project. So there's always the combination of theory, practice, and evaluation. I think it's really important. And I think this is going to be one of the main difference when we think about just creative practice and practice-based research. So as I said before, I've identified 3 or 4 elements which I think are important to define what practice-based research is. So the first thing is this idea of adding, of seeking new knowledge, right? So what we do with practice-based research, or with research, actually in all the research, we're trying to seek to augment our knowledge. Now, obviously, with practice-based, it's the same. You're still looking to develop new knowledge, and you still have, and this is the important thing, you with practice-based research, you claim novelty to some degree, but it's not enough, I argue, to just say that this is a creative work, therefore it's original, because that's not enough. That's a definition of any artistic work. So you also need to have some kind of contribution to knowledge in terms of the knowledge itself, not just your artwork. So I think this is the important definition and the important distinction between just creative work and practice-based research. And this is very interesting here, this definition of practice-based research, how very frequently it denotes both things, so the process and the product. And if you had a chance to talk to Francisco on that, he'll tell you how much time we spent talking about methodologies, and how very often the methodology is almost the essence and the core of some examples of practice-based research, because this is where you have to design it from scratch. And this is what's so fascinating about practice-based research. There's no template. Even if you work in specific discipline, there's no template, because not only the way how you conduct your research will be different, but even the methodologies will be very different from another person who works within the same discipline. And this is by definition so creative and so exploratory. And yes, the main focus for all research, as we said, is to add knowledge where it did not exist before. So adding or creating, contributing to knowledge, this first criteria, or this first idea. Now, the second one for me, in terms of thinking about the definition, is the idea of researcher creator. So what is your role in your research? And I think, again, going back to Gauntlet, I think what he says is the researcher as a creator beyond writing, which is quite interesting because you will still be writing in one way or another about your project, is someone who's engaged in an exploratory creative process in order to explore research questions. So the same thing we said, and I think this is what's different from just creative research methods, which involve asking participants to make the things, not you as the researcher. So this is one of the distinction. And Gauntlet quotes Haynes, who and Gauntlet himself, he writes quite a lot about this idea of autoethnography. And to be honest with you, I never really thought about it that much before, but it made me think about my own project, to which I hinted already in the previous or before last slide, where I realized the longer I think about it, that my film personally was really a form of autoethnography. And I thought the film was about the community, about their filmmaking, but it really was very much about researchers like myself redefining the way to approach this kind of work. And I think this is what you will realize very often, not always, but very often on some examples of practice-based research, that you as a researchers, you are very often in the focus on the reflexive inquiry. And this is because you have to define the way to do things. You have to define your methodology, test them within your works. You basically you're being experimented on as a creative person, because you define what you're doing, you test it, and you have to do it over and over again until it works. I'm obviously simplifying hugely, but I think you all understand what I'm trying to say here. So you are defining the way you do things, and effectively you're becoming part of the research as the person who is responsible for this. So we have contribution to knowledge, we have yourself as a researcher. Of course, the next thing we need to think about is the artifact itself. And this is when it gets really interesting, because again, as I said, this session doesn't talk, or this whole series doesn't focus specifically on one discipline or another. So your artifact could be so many different things, and it's really interesting. And one of the things I really enjoyed, and that's why I've uploaded the text for you, and there's a reference for it. So what Linda Candy did in one of her books, she asked practice-based researchers, her students and other people who were involved in a workshop she organized, what was it that they were trying to achieve with the practice-based research? And it was really interesting how many people were saying things like that. They just want to address research questions through practice and to create new knowledge for practice. So it looks like we're kind of repeating the same things, like all the definitions point us to the same idea, that the process, and very often the artifact itself, is the very answer to your research question. And very often, and this is also very interesting, going back to thinking about methodologies, and we will know more about it, we'll discuss it more once we have these 2 sessions on methodologies, but very often the practice, the question, are also directed, in many cases, towards enlightening and enhancing practice. So again, reflecting back on defining, redefining, and modifying methodologies effectively. So really is quite interesting. And again, we could spend a long time analyzing different examples of what an artifact can be. But I think the interesting thing is the fact that it's not just a creative product, but the way it's being produced and the way what it is points you back to the process itself. And I think this is what's crucial about it. And I think my PowerPoint froze for a second. Okay, so now what I would like to do, that's a lot of talking and there's still so much to cover. What I would like to do is very quickly, because I know we have people from very different backgrounds and disciplines here. I just wanted to run a very quick questionnaire, which I prepared for you, which is asking these 3 main questions. So what is your research questions? What is your practice? And what is your artifact, or an artifact you're aiming for? So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna copy this link. I will ask And I'm so sorry because I don't see the chat and I can see people are texting. So I will make sure I read it all. But what I want to do right now is to paste it here and ask you to spend just a couple of minutes replying to the questions. And all I'll do, I will open it on my computer and hopefully I can see the answers. And meantime, I can have a sip of water. It's actually green tea.
Hi, Agata.
Oh.
I think the link, at least for me, is not open. It's not working. If you can try again.
Okay, so I'm just gonna take it once again. Shorten link, copy. Here it is. Okay, let's try again.
Yeah, I think now it's okay. Yeah, working.
Fantastic. So I'm just gonna open the page. I don't have any responses just yet. Okay. So what I might do as people are typing, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and I will share my screen with forms and hopefully we'll start seeing some responses here. Someone's artifact is a shoe prototype. I love shoes. I would like to talk to you afterwards, whoever you are. An investigation, how so interesting. Oh wow. Some absolutely amazing things are coming through already. Like this one, can you feel dance or do you have to see it? How fascinating. Sound maps, oh wow. Psychogeography, oh, super fascinating. Okay, I'm just gonna check the other question. Dance film studied. Very, very pleased that we have people from so many different disciplines. I think that was really the idea. Okay. So we have 22 responses. I know there's 50 plus people in the room. I don't know why you can only see 5 responses here. I think I just have to.
Hi, Agata. Kate is asking if it's possible to see everyone's inputs. There's a question in the chat.
Sorry, what was the question, Francisco?
If it's possible to see everyone's input, answers for this questionnaire.
So can you see my screen now? I refreshed it and there's 24.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So what I can do, because it's really fascinating, there's so many interesting things I would never think about here. Like this one, for example, screen is the brain, a moving image inquiry into visual, oh, it disappeared, thinking in dyslexia. Changing the change revision in menopause. So many interesting things. So what I can do if people are okay with this, because this is all anonymous, as you can see, but it gives us a really good idea what I can do following the session. I can export it into a spreadsheet and upload it to Teams, because I think it's just really interesting to see. I wish we had. I start to think this hour and a half is just not enough. Okay, I'm gonna stop this because I realized that we only have 20 minutes. Francisco hasn't even started, and we haven't even started talking about case study and discussion. So I'm gonna ask people to keep typing the things if possible. But what I will do is to stop sharing my screen and very quickly go back to my PowerPoint. But thank you so much for sharing this. It's just really They're fascinating. It's just so good. Okay. So, I promise you I'm almost done. So I'm not gonna go through this slide in detail. This is again from our friend David Gauntlet, who has some example here of what final products could be and what the research questions might be. So I'll leave it for you to explore following the session. And this is the last component. So we talked about contribution to knowledge, yourself as an artist, or creator or researcher, and the artifact. And the fourth element here is this idea of reflexive practice. So I will not spend more time on this, but I think this is something we will be, because there's a session on that as well. But I think all I'm gonna say at the moment is that definitely it is a very, very important element of practice-based research, because what it means is that you're constantly evaluating and re-evaluating your process and obviously your outcomes and outputs. And I think without that, we can probably not call what we're doing a practice-based research, because I think this idea of reflection and evaluation is very, very deeply embedded in what we're doing. So I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. I'm so sorry, Francisco. And I'm just gonna invite Francisco to join in and introduce our co-reading, and hopefully we'll still have at least 10 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it is, to discuss some things.
Yeah, so thank you, Agata. I think, well, let's try something. I'm going to go quickly on the co-reading because I was supposed to take 20 minutes. I don't want to do that. I want to leave space for questions, and I'm trying to go quick on that and see if we can have 10 minutes in the end. Yeah, just share my screen, 1 minute. Hope you can see the presentation.
Yes, we can, yes.
Yes, okay, yeah. So yeah, thank you, Agata. Well, first, just a few words. I'd like to say thank you for organizing this series. I think it's a really interesting opportunity for us, PhD students, practitioners, supervisors, and so on. And it has been, for me, sometimes a dark territory to navigate, by its lacks of clarity and regulation. Even the literature can find different information, different conceptual ideas. So yeah, it's a nice opportunity to have those conversations and reflects and hope clarification what constitutes practice-based research, the challenge, the applications, but also I think, and that's my personal opinion, the important contribution with practice-based research that can provide for this massive global crisis we're living. Social injustice, global pandemic, political polarization, rising violence, climate collapse. And I believe that the sensory response insights from practice-based researchers can offer at least different perspective to respond to those to this crisis. So, yeah, I hope you can enjoy those. Yeah, I'm very happy with this series. Let's go to the text. So, basically, it's just a summary of the practice-based research guide by Linda Candy. When I'm going to some a little bit definitions and distinction between things. That's what the text about. First, the distinction between practice-based research and practice-led research, in which I try to, in few words, make this distinction according to the text. If in order to answer research questions or in order to answer research problems, you have a creative artifact as the base of the contribution to knowledge, and as an output, that's practice-based research. And if the research leads primarily to understand about the practice, or trying to emphasize understand the specific nature of the practice and how to improve it, that's practice-led research, and doesn't necessarily to have there's no necessity to have an output artifact as an output. Basic definitions. Then practice and research is not something new outside academia. I think Agata already touched on this point. It has been, actually is very old. If you see, it has been carried out by practitioners, artists, designers, curators, artists, musicians, with the objective for searching new understanding, new concepts, developing, testing new technologies, and also finding new ways to work with existing tools. And I think it's important for us, at least, I think it's important for us to understand it's not something new outside the PhD context, because it gives us confidence as practitioners, as researchers. We have those references in the past. you have those support and actually maybe can give us confidence to ask for small demands on institutions and university, how to be more flexible, you know, and inside the same structure we are as other PhD students. Just to highlight these few pictures that I select just as an evidence. Arno Schoenberg, famous musician from last century, challenged the Western tonal system of music and completely changed the way to think about music. And he's a kind of is a notebook, it's a kind of evidential material when he's using colors to identify the system. So there was lots of research going on here. Or Emma Kunz, for example, again, an example that's not something new, the combination between research and artistic practice, when she was investigating interesting in healing properties and esoteric studies with, and also produced those beautiful geometric picture drawings with lines and color, but the purpose of those drawings are not only from aesthetic proposition, actually, just trying to, looking for healing properties on those drawings. So the research and the artistic practice are connected and possible to separate those things. Now, more recently and more contemporary example, Lawrence Abu Hamdan, probably some of you have heard about him. Actually, he did his PhD at Goldsmith University in the intersection between forensic and artistic practice, so criminal investigation and artistic practice. And I think that's an interesting example. Also, I'm not going to spend some more time here, but I just have a look on his name. He just won the Turner Prize two years ago, I think, or 3 years ago. And he's using the sonic methods and listening as a method for political crimes around the world when he's commissioned by International Human Rights or International Amnesty. But actually, it unfolds an artistic installation. So it's impossible to separate the artistic practice with those other investigations he's doing. So he's an artist, not investigator. So that's a kind of another interesting example. I'm going to jump here. That's Agata already touched on this point. So inside the academic, inside PhD doctoral level is something relatively new. And then distinction between practice-based PhD and what she calls in the text, the author calls in the text a pure practice or other practice that doesn't involve doctoral level. And based on 3 conditions, Agata already touched on this point. So it must go beyond individual particular goal. It requires dissemination, so must be disseminated, shared with a wider community, and peer journals, conferences, publications, or festivals and art exhibitions, so on. That's important thing about practice research PhD, according to the text. And we are inside a place in the same structured process that's defined by university examination and regulation. You need to go to the same milestones, the same, viva in the end, and the guidelines the same for us, practice-based researchers, or for any other scientific research. And then distinctions and similarities. Again, similarities between practice-based research and regular PhD. We are in the same structure. The candidate would expect to satisfy the same things, the same milestones. And the main difference, according to the text, is the output. Practice-based researchers have the creative work, plus the written contextualization. The regular PhD just the written PhD. I would argue here that there are more differences, I think, on the process itself, and I'm going to reflect on that soon. Research process, I'm going to jump in this, it's the same. So we're in the same structure, the same research process. You must have, as practice-based researchers, define the series of questions or problems, specify the research context, why it's important, what has been conducted in the area, etc. And specify the research methods for addressing those questions, how. And Agata touched on a very important point, the research methods for practice-based research, and I think for most of us, sometimes you need to almost like develop it or rearrange it or combine things. It's different from scientific research when you have the methods there, you just select your methods, go to the lab, do your work, come back with the results and show, oh, that's the results. I'm quite simplifying here, but in practice-based research, you need to have this challenge. You need to figure out what you're going to do with your methods and why and justify. And again, the creative output can be produced part of practical undertaking as integral part of the research process. However, with the written analysis or dissertation to demonstrate critical reflection. I'm not going to spend time here too. I think critical Agata already touched on this point. So critical reflection is important because the work itself cannot, the creative work cannot be expected to speak for themselves at some point. And the idea of dissemination, other people must access your work, understand the context in order to test it or to challenge or to expand anyway, and so on. And PhD knowledge, again, we're expected to go through original investigation and make a distinct and significant contribution to knowledge that must be shared and verified or challenged or tested by others. And here, I think I'm just quoting Salome Vogelin here. She did a talk last year about artistic practice and research, and I think that's really fascinating idea to think about knowledge in practical research. And she illuminates that art presents possibilities for a different knowledge, and new questions, innovative technologies, methods, and process that can engage artistic issues as well as the great challenge of today. So I think that's an important point for reflection in our conversation, what really means knowledge and the contribution to knowledge in practice-based research that is different from traditional research, especially from scientific research, that knowledge is trustable, quantifiable, measurable. And here we talk about, more sensory, let's say, way of knowledge. And just to finish, personal reflections, again, for me, more questions actually that I have than the forms and definitions of research versus ambiguity of the practice, which means the nature of what constitutes data that's sometimes intangible, immeasurable, ephemeral, not trustful according to traditional research standard. And giving my example of my research, I'm using sonic methodology. Sorry, I didn't talk about my research. Anyway, I'm doing practice-based research just in the early stage review, actually. Just have my early stage review next week. So I still have lots of questions, and I'm using sonic methodologies applying documentary film. I came from sound background, sound arts, and I'm using part of the sonic methodology is listening as a method of research. So listening as a method of research is intangible, immeasurable, is not trustful according to traditional research. So how to deal with the sensory data and how you consider data in practice-based research? That's a question that I have. And how to balance the manage emerging complexity between creative practice versus research rigors, which means in the process of making things, and the messy process of making things and failure, and other questions come up, you come back to the research, and research leads you back to the practice. And I see it's a kind of cyclical circular process, and how to balance those emergencies and complexities with research rigors required. Just some questions. So should practice-based research ask new questions or asking different from traditional research? What kind of questions, what the nature of questions you should ask? I think that's a kind of good provocation. Should the documentation of the research process be included on the written thesis? Just a question that I have. And the focus of practice-based research PhD as an individual would exclude the collective aspect of some artistic practice, such as filmmaking or even music or artistic collective. I think it's another point, and again, from my perspective, in my experience, I'm proposing a short documentary film, exploring different ways to work with sound and documentary. But how can I produce a documentary as a solo, individual researcher, practitioner? So filmmaking requires collaboration. I need to rely on collaboration with other skills, other peoples, and maybe how institutions and how research centers can provide those territory for collaboration. And I think that's another challenge maybe for practical research in some specific areas. Yes, just going to finish here.
Thank you so much, Francisco. That's just really, really brilliant. And I do apologize that I didn't give you all 20 minutes for this. It's entirely my fault.
Okay.
We're learning as we're going along. Does anyone have any comments or questions? I also have a list of questions where I think we can relate to this text, and I'll open it on the slide in a second. But does anyone have any comments just based on Francisco's presentation? Dan, if you just want to unmute yourself.
Hello. Oh, my camera's doing a stupid thing. Hello. For God's
Hello.
sake, I was just wondering. I read a really interesting essay yesterday about the filmmaking process as a sort of form of practice-based research, and one of the questions that was raised, and it wasn't answered in the essay, was about the where you draw the line between self-reflexive research, self-reflexive like documentation. So, for example, creating a piece of work and keeping a production journal or like a research journal of your findings, and then having to produce, you know, potentially an extra piece of work, so like an exegesis for the thing. But then does that then complicate things because you're removing yourself from the artistic process, knowing that you're going to have to write a separate kind of cold analytical piece of text about it? Do you know what I mean? As opposed to the journal, which feels like more like first-hand research. So I'm just curious as to your thoughts on that, and where you kind of see that in just in the context of what you've been talking about so far.
Do you mind if I bounce the question back? How do you feel about it? What would you ideally, the way, you know, how would you approach it ideally? What do you think?
I mean, I'm a first-year PhD student, so I'm trying to do as little writing as possible in an ideal world. But I think my personal belief is that the journal, I kind of agree with the essay that I read, which is that it's complicated, is the short answer, and the journal kind of exists as part of the artifact itself, because it is part of your creative documentation of the thing as well as an exegesis. But I don't know is the short answer. You know, I'm kind of interested. One of the things I'm interested in is the split between where my like artistic research ends and my academic research begins, and not knowing where that is yet. I think that's, you know, that doesn't answer your bounce back question. I think maybe that's the point.
So, it's fantastic what you're saying, because you see, this is why the next session is exactly about that, because I'm also very much interested in knowing how different people think about it. And I don't think I can provide you with an easy answer, because that's one of the things where we somehow disagreement, because I do see examples where the writing is just so essential. And I personally, if you want to know my opinion, I personally believe that there's definitely a massive value in your written element. And I think, from my opinion, it is not that this is the right way. My opinion is it is absolutely essential. And I think not only just to explain things, because that might sound very simplistic, but I think, at least from my experience, sometimes when you write about your practice, in the process of writing about your practice, you understand some elements of it. So personally, it helps me with some things. I think it's something interesting about, because if you think about this, writing, no matter if it's creative writing or academic writing, is a creative process in itself as well. And I think sometimes when you externalize your thoughts, either by talking about it, hence the seminar, or writing about it, you might come to some kind of unexpected conclusions. And I don't know how many people would agree with that or not, but that is how I see it. Now, I understand, I know, I'm very much aware that this discussion is one of the questions we're gonna answer. So hopefully this is something we'll have more time to discuss in the next session, because I think it's a very, very important one. I don't know if anyone wants to comment, and I'm sorry, because I think there was some thumbs up and it disappeared. So I don't want to make sure people don't disappear. But does anyone else have a different opinion or similar in terms of the writing? Yeah, Elana, here you are. So if you, I don't know if this is the answer to this question or you have another question.
Oh, no, I definitely wanted to completely concur that writing is absolutely essential, even if you are claiming as a practitioner that you don't write or you don't need to explain anything. Writing is slow thinking.
Mm.
That's the purpose of writing. It is slow thinking. It slows you down. It helps you go deeper. You cannot progress. I'm sorry, I think. For anybody who doesn't know me, I write about art as a discipline, as a knowledge-forming discipline. I have PhD students that I supervise. I got my PhD in 2008 across fine art practice and history of art. So I've got those two methodologies. So I can't. If I had a student that said to me, "I don't want to write," I would say, "You're on the then go and do a master's."
Yeah.
To be so harsh, I'm way harsher. I'm at the University of Hertfordshire. For me, it's so absolutely essential.
Yeah. No, thank you for your comment. I do agree with you. as I said, I'm a bit perhaps milder in the way I express it, but I do think it has a massive value, and I really think it's essential. And I think, I think maybe the question here is whether what you want to do is the just purely creative work, or but even with purely creative work, I think it's just very useful. I think there's a huge value. It's so interesting. I am so upset at myself that I was talking for so long and didn't leave enough space for these conversations, because I'm aware that people might have to leave. But I have 1 or 2 more slides, but before I do it, would anyone else like to ask any questions or comments? Because I do want to show you these last 2 slides, because it's a way for me to wrap it up. And perhaps, if needed, if people want to, maybe we can have some mini session in between or before the next one, just to allow for the conversation. If people want to do this, I'm more than happy to schedule, I don't know, half an hour here and there at some point before the next session. If not, we can obviously use Teams and catch up with this. But would anyone else want to comment before I show you the final slide or 2? I think people don't want to take the precious time. Okay, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take an executive decision. I'm just gonna bring back my PowerPoint, and like with everything, I'm just gonna listen to everyone's comments. So if people do want to have another session just to discuss it, it's fine. If not, I can guarantee that there will be more time for discussions with the next sessions, because I won't be introducing what the series is about and where the things live and all these things. So we will have definitely more time for it, because all the guest speakers are strictly given half an hour to talk, and I was just really greedy today. So these are a couple of questions I had in mind in relation to the core reading. And funny enough, when I had a conversation with Linda Candy last week, she said, "Oh, this text is so old." That was one of the first comments she had. And that made me think this is so interesting. So even herself thinks that things probably change and evolve. And I think Francisco pointed us to a couple of the things. So these are the questions we might bring back, and I'll try to integrate them in the following sessions just to see how that works. So of course, we're not going to have time to talk about the act of killing, but I do recommend you watching the film if you haven't. I think the reason it's such an amazing case study, because not only this is a very successful, however disturbing, film, really interesting. I was lucky enough to see it at one of the festivals. I can't remember which festival it was right now, because I was just running all around the festivals, and see the longer version with Joshua Oppenheimer, the director, who is talking about the film. But you can just see it. And what I uploaded to Teams is because it became ref case study, and there's some very, very interesting things, which I summarized in this one slide. I will not go into details here because we don't have time for it. But if you didn't have time to check that out, please do, because it's really informative. And this is one of these very few examples of a film which gets really massive critical acclaim, and it's just gets lots of awards, and at the same time it's just extremely impactful in many different levels. Now, we won't have time to do this today, but I might put it on Teams and include it in next week's session. So this is one of the things, another question I wanted people to do for me, and I think this is what is gonna be leading me towards the last session. I know this is the first one. So this is the question about training and support. So I wanted to know what was the most valuable learning experience which developed you as practice-based researchers. What kind of training you were missing, and what do you think would be the guidance and training you would like in ideal work to receive as your practice-based journey. So I'm not going to be sharing this right now because I don't want to keep you after 5 o'clock, but I will share this with everyone. And that was supposed to be the open discussion time, which it isn't. So just the final thing is, again, get in touch with me if you want to introduce the core reading for the next time. I very, very briefly glanced at the chat, and I know that some people still have problems joining the Teams. I'll make sure I read all the comments, and again, get in touch with me if there's a problem. I will find a way in one way or another. And if we have to move away from Teams to another platform, I'll do this. But I think it does work for most of the people, so we'll see how that works. And again, if you also do want to suggest some other additional topics beyond this 8 or almost 9 I have designed, if you feel like there's another thing we should discuss, let me know, and I'll just make sure I include it in the next round. And here are a couple of references for the very few things I just used today. And again, this is the way you can find me. Anything you want to comment on, suggest, or discuss beyond this seminar, just get in touch with me, and I'll be really, really happy to talk to you and discuss your projects and just hear more about it. And I will share the questionnaire we did about people's work, because I think it's very, very interesting. So thank you so very much. I am so terribly sorry we didn't have time for discussion. I promise you it's going to be very different going forward. And hopefully this first session was a good warm-up for what's going to happen afterwards. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much. And I'll be really, really glad to hear from people and just really study what you're doing and what kind of artifacts you're working on, what kind of research questions you have. And next session, as I said, we're going to be talking about this distinction between your inner artist and how you have to tame it sometimes to work on your research. So thank you so much, everyone. And
Thank you.
enjoy your afternoon. Thanks.